Okay, I think we've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to get things started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CYMG's Fairtrade event. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be recording the session, so please be mindful of that if you want to have your camera on. The Co-op Young Members Group created this event to show other young people who are enthusiastic about fair trade, the environment, and other important issues how they can make an impact. We hope it inspires you, and we hope you leave knowing something you didn't at the outset. I'll now hand the event over to Emily Pearce, who's going to tell you a bit about herself.
Hello everyone, please bear with me while I do the sharing of screen so you can see what I'm going to talk to you about today. Hopefully that's now done it. You can let me know, Saul, that'd be helpful.
Not just yet.
Now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, brilliant. Right, well, hello everyone, and I'm delighted to talk to you today. Before I introduce myself properly, I'm going to kick us off with a bit of a quiz. So hopefully this will be something good for you all to enjoy, to get you into the mood, because I realise it is a Thursday evening, and I'm really, really pleased that so many of you are here today to talk about fair trade, which is absolutely my favourite subject. So what I've been asked to talk about today is to talk about who I am, give a bit more of an intro into fair trades, into what fair trade is, and also Co-op's leading commitment. And then Saul and I are going to have a bit of a Q&A session, and I'd really welcome any questions from you. So please do use the chat at any time to ask any questions, and towards the end we'll have an opportunity to go through some of those. So please do not feel afraid to do so. So to get us in the mood, I've got us a little bit of a true and false activity to get us going. So please use the chat to feed in. So question 1, fair trade is a movement campaigning to make trade fair. Do you agree? True or false? How's it looking, Saul? I can't see the chat for some reason.
I think you might be able to click on it at the bottom and it might pop up, I believe. We're getting a lot of trues. We're 100% true so far.
I'm very glad to hear that. It absolutely is true. Fair trade is absolutely all about making trade fair. And there are actually over 10,000 grassroots campaigning groups in the UK alone who are promoting fair trade in their local communities. So those include fair trade towns, cities, boroughs, fair trade schools and universities. So it's a huge movement of people. So question 2, 1 in 6 bananas brought to the UK are fair trade. True or false? How's it looking, Saul?
It's a little more contentious. We've got a couple falses in here. People aren't too sure.
Okay, how's it looking? I think the
prevailing response is true, but I think it's only edging it.
Okay, interesting. So we're thinking about 90%. Right, well, that's really, really interesting to know. So it's actually false. Because I'm pleased to say, actually a third of bananas bought in the UK are fair trade. That's amazing. So it's a huge success story for the fair trade movement. A third of bananas are fair trade. So question 3, fair trade tackles the climate crisis. What do you think?
People seem to think that's true.
Looking, Saul?
Don't think we've got a single false yet.
I'm very, very, very pleased to hear that. So absolutely, it is true. There are loads of ways that fair trade supports the environmental footprint of fair trade producers, helping them through their standards to implement better environmentally friendly practices and improve their agriculture. And just as one example, in fair trade cotton, the environmental footprint of fair trade cotton is 5 times lower than conventional cotton. So it's a huge benefit where fair trade producers get that support from the standards, the producer networks in the system, etc., to help them produce more sustainably. One of the key ways they do that is to help reduce reliance on pesticides, which are extremely toxic to people and the environment. And so it's a huge benefit to us all if the environmental footprint is improved. So question 4, final quiz question. In 2013, all Co-op own brand coffee became fair trade. What do you think? True or false? And again, Saul, I can't always see the chat, so let me know how it's looking.
Mostly true, but there's a couple of falses in there.
Oh, okay. That is actually false. That was my little tricky question in there for the absolute Co-op nerds in the room. It's actually false because it was 2003 that all Co-op own brand coffee became fair trade, and that was a first for any retailer. So it's something we can be really, really proud of, and we were way ahead of the game. And we'll talk a little bit more about coffee later. So hopefully that gave you a bit in the mood, getting a bit excited to learn a bit more about fair trade. So let's go into a bit more detail. So just before I begin further, just tell you a little bit more about me. So I am Sustainable Sourcing and Fair Trade Manager for the Co-op, and I sit within the Co-op's Ethical, Sustainability and Policy team. And so our team is responsible for setting the sustainability strategy for the business. And I have the extreme privilege of leading our fair trade strategy. And I also contribute to our future food strategy sustainability ambition. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But a bit more about me. So I've worked for the Co-op for coming up to 6 years this year. But before that, I worked in ethics and sustainability my entire career. But I'm actually, and that's why I've got this kind of weird picture of like fashion shoot in the middle, I'm actually a former fashion designer. So that's where I started my career, working in the fashion industry. And that's where I got my eureka moment. Like many of you who are interested in this subject, there'll be something that happened, something you saw that sparked your interest, got you excited about the people behind your products. And for me, it was motivated all by one experience. I was at university, I was a bit disillusioned, I didn't know what I really wanted to do. And I saw a talk by the Environmental Justice Foundation, and it was on this report you see on the right, White Gold. And it was talking about the environmental footprint and the issues that are prevalent in global cotton production. And it was an absolute eureka moment where I realized that the choices I made in that instance as a fashion designer or a fashion design student had a direct impact on the people in the supply chain, the practices by which they operated, their livelihoods, etc. And I was just absolutely captivated by the idea, and it really resonated with my own personal values of fairness. And so I've been on a mission ever since to try and improve the way that business and society works so that we have a fair society for all. So that's more about me. So what are the issues? So this is what I call my doom slide. It's not a great picture. So I'm sure, like me, you are probably a bit concerned about all the issues we face as a society. In the news at the moment, we can't get away from the multitude of issues that we face, not just as a food retailer and a food system, but as a wider global society. And for me, I'm deeply motivated by making a difference through what I do. And I strongly believe that we all have the ability to be the change we wish to see in our society, and that the decisions we make in our lives and in our jobs have that ripple effect affecting a wider society. So some of the issues you can see on screen here include a lack of health and safety, poor governance, waste issues, pollution, fair trade, political systems, climate change, deforestation, child labour, forced labour, pandemics, sustainable sourcing, the list goes on. So as a business and as a society, there's a lot of issues that we have to try and tackle together. And that's absolutely where the Ethics, Sustainability and Policy team at the Co-op, we take a lead. So this slide here sets out how we operate. So the team that I work in are all around leading the business wide ethical and sustainability strategy, our performance management and policy. And so we're really trying to make sure that the co-op remains at the forefront of ethical retailing. And our role touches on strategy and policy development, but also ethical performance management and ensuring that we're transparent and we have really amazing communications that engage with you. You can see there are areas of impact which go across many of those things I touched on the former slide, but from climate change, sustainable diets, environment, plastics, human rights, fair trade, sustainable sourcing, etc. So it's a really exciting team. And 3 years ago, we launched the Future of Food. You can see on the right-hand side there, which sets out our ambitions to 2030 of how Co-op is aiming to make play our part in how we address some of those really challenging issues I showed you on the slide before. So it's a really fascinating team to be a part of, but ultimately why we do what we do is that we want to make the right choice, the easy choice for our customers and our members, and do that in a cooperative way and have a positive impact on the communities that we trade with, and take action on the things that we know that our members like you and our customers really, really care about. And I guess I don't really need to go through this slide, given the slide I said before, but why is it needed? I think we know now more than ever how fragile our food systems are, and that we face a lot of social environmental issues in the supply chain. Public interest, as it should, I'm very glad it is at the highest it's ever been. And I know that's just going to continue. And that means that we really need to continue to take action and lead on these really challenging issues. So I'm going to talk a bit today about fair trade, and that's all covered in chapter 2. So I'd really encourage after this session to go and have a look at our Future of Food. I'm sure we can share that link to you in the chat. But really we're going to talk about how what we do through fair trade is helping to achieve our ambition that everyone who produces our food will get a fair deal. So without further ado, I'll go on to fair trade specifically. So I'm sure I'm actually preaching to people who know a little bit about fair trade already, and this is a great opportunity today to talk a little bit more about the detail. So I'll just give an overview, but I know Saul and I are going to have a bit of a chat later about some specific questions that you had, but please continue to put any questions in the chat. But I guess the main thing I'd say is that farmers, growers and workers within our global supply chains have the least power within the food system, and they are also the most vulnerable to drops in the market. Many of the commodities that we use as ingredients in our products are traded on the global market, and thus are subject to supply and demand. And that means that sometimes the price can drop below a sustainable minimum. And that means that many of the people who grow the ingredients used in our products live in poverty. And that is a sad fact that we have to face up to. Whereas fair trade means that these people are empowered by trade rather than aid, and are given the tools to help themselves and to strengthen their own communities. And we absolutely believe, and particularly because it's been told to us by producers that we have visited, that fair trade remains the gold standard in certification. And the reason for that is it is more than a logo. It is actual movement. And the biggest benefit that it provides is that it guarantees a fair price for farmers. And then, so within the fair trade system, that fair trade minimum price means that when that ingredient is traded, fair trade work to set a minimum sustainable price, and that means that those farmers are protected against any drops in the market below that sustainable minimum. And I'll talk a little bit later about real cases of how that's really safeguarded farmers in the global system. In addition to that, there's the additional fair trade premium, which goes to the farming cooperatives, which they can then invest in their own, farming businesses or into community projects of their own choice. And the premium is being used to send kids to school. It's being used to educate adults who haven't had any sort of education themselves. It's being used to help their productivity on the farm so they can get a higher livelihood. It's a hugely important part of the fair trade system and essential to helping these communities have a wider ripple effect outside of the direct money they get from the fair trade price. And in addition, which is really, really important, it's also giving farmers and producers a voice. So some of these workers in the global supply chain, these producers in the global supply chain, in normal conventional supply chains, have no opportunity to have a say in a global certification, have a say in how they're traded with. But this is all about trade justice, and the fair trade system puts justice back in the heart of how that system operates and ensures that producers have their own voice in that system. So producers are equal members within Fairtrade International, have a say in how the standards are set, etc. And it's really, really important that they are at the forefront of the standard that is helping to deliver for them. So if I was to put that into 4 summary points, it would be those key messages you can see on the right. So only fair trade pays producers fairly. Only fair trade gives producers control over their future. Only fair trade does the right thing by people and the planet. And also only fair trade strengthens the wider communities that they sit in around the world. And on the left, I won't go into those details there, but are some other proof points about why fair trade is the scheme that we believe is the gold standard and sets a new bar for ethical retailing. So what's Co-op's commitment? So many of you will be really familiar with our fantastic core 7 commitments you can see on screen, but we're really, really proud to be the largest convenience retailer of fair trade in the UK, and we have over 25 years of heritage, so we've got like loads and loads to be proud of. We have supported fair trade since before the standard was actually set. So actually we started working with Cafe Direct, who are a pioneering and amazing coffee producer who were launched in 1992, and we've been working with them since then, and they do amazing work to try and put more value of the coffee back into the hands of producers. And they were one of the first fair trade certified brands when the mark launched in 1994. And in 1994, we then pioneered and made a commitment to fair trade, and we've been absolutely progressing on that ever since. So we were so proud in 2019, what year is it? 2019, to celebrate 25 years of fair trade that you can see in the left-hand corner there. And we're now on our 27th year, which is absolutely amazing. So what we've done is really in the past is to identify the big 7 categories where we could have a huge impact because we sell a lot of these ingredients all year round. So we know that by committing to fair trade on these core 7 categories, we can absolutely make the biggest impact to the producers in our supply chain who are reliant on incomes from these key commodities. And so that's where we've been focusing for at least the last 5 years. So we're really proud that 100% of the tea, coffee, bananas, African roses, bagged sugar, and cocoa that we sell in store are fair trade. And we are also the world's largest retailer of fair trade wine, which is absolutely fantastic. And in addition to that, we are also working on pioneering fair trade products with our partner Tradecraft. So the fair trade movement is bigger than Fairtrade International. There are other fair trade schemes out there. And so in rubber and charcoal, we work with Tradecraft to really support producers in Sri Lanka and Namibia as well. So it's a really, really important commitment that we have. And we continue to be challenged by our members to increase our commitment. So the last AGM motion that we had on fair trade was in 2019, which really asked the Co-op to increase our commitment even further and to make even more progress in what we do in the future. And so I'm going to share with you a slide which sets out our new ambition. So our new strategy is to become the UK's biggest supporter of fair trade, and we want to make it easier for our customers, our members and our colleagues to choose fair trade and to support the fair trade movement. And we'll do that through 3 different buckets of activity that you can see on screen now. So through our sourcing pillar, which is really around how we will grow the contribution that we make to fair trade producers. So that's really about how we can sell as much fair trade ingredients through our products as we can, and through all the channels that we have available to us. You know, we've got a fantastic opportunity as a wholesale business in getting more fair trade products to more people, just like we did many years ago when we were the first retailer to make sure that fair trade products were available in every one of our stores. We've got an amazing opportunity to do that. And then on our innovation pillar, which Saul and I are going to talk a little bit more about in more detail in a moment, this is all about how we build our fair trade leadership so that we strengthen those producer communities from which we source. And this is really where I think Co-op's USP is really centred. So we, as a business, don't just source fair trade, we go over and above to try and ensure that we are supporting those fair trade communities. And we do that through things like sourcing commitments. So for instance, on Finty, who are one of the suppliers of our amazing 99T range, we helped set them up as a cooperative and get them fair trade certified back in 2012. And then since then, we've ensured that at least 10% of the blend of our 99T comes from Finty. And that ensures that they know that they always have a buyer of fair trade over the years. So we're going over and above to help cultivate fair trade producers in the supply chain, converting them to fair trade, but also ensuring that we have in various areas sourcing commitments that ensure that they are a part of our supply chain for the long term. In addition, we also support producers by investing over and above our sourcing of fair trade, so the fair price and premium that I talked about before, because we know that the challenges in the global supply chain are so much that there are additional projects that we can do to help galvanise that international development, help galvanise and mitigate climate change. And so we invest in projects in key sourcing countries and key cooperatives to help those producers to develop into the future and tackle some of the challenges that they face within the supply chain. So a really good example of that you can see in the picture, that I hope you're already aware of, is the Women's School of Leadership in Côte d'Ivoire. And that's some of my colleagues out in Côte d'Ivoire in 2019. And basically this amazing school is set up by Fairtrade Africa to help female cocoa farmers in Côte d'Ivoire to develop leadership skills. Now, this may feel like quite an odd project for some of us, but actually in cocoa farming, women are often quite a large proportion of the cocoa farmers, but they get by far the least amount of pay. And so Fairtrade had a big piece of research they brought out about this about a year or so ago, where they found on average, the average cocoa farmer makes per day 74 pence per day on average. If you're a female cocoa farmer, it's even worse. It's 23 pence per day. So some of the big issues that can exist in communities like this is gender disempowerment. So invisible women is how Fairtrade talks about it, where there are women there who are a huge part of the cocoa industry, but are disempowered, not part of any leadership roles, and not fairly paid or contribute in the running of their societies. And this is one of the ways that Fairtrade and partners like ourselves can help to change the game. So with the Women's School of Leadership that we're so proud to have been funding since 2017, we are helping female cocoa farmers to access business skills, leadership training, which increases their confidence, increases their ability to make decisions, to run their cocoa farms like businesses, to contribute in how the running of the cooperative that they're a part of, or as we have met, become leaders of their cooperative, which can be unheard of in these communities. And so through pioneering initiatives like this, we can really tackle some of those root causes that can keep people in poverty or keep them disempowered in their lives, which we're so proud of. And then our third bucket, and then I'll promise, Saul, we can go on to you asking me some questions, is around comms. So this means nothing if we can't get other people like yourselves to shout about it, talk about it, and buy Fairtrade. And I think the thing I'd really leave you with before we go on to the next part of the session is Fairtrade is a market-driven scheme. It relies on people like you, people like me, and companies like the Co-op to commit to purchasing Fairtrade for the scheme to work. So we all have incredible power to contribute and stand in solidarity with farmers like the ones you can see there, who and say we demand, and we are willing to say that you deserve a better life, you deserve dignity, you deserve respect, you deserve a fair price. And so we as consumers have, and citizens have, an incredible power in the global system. And fair trade is actually quite a divisive experiment. It started as an experiment, as an example of how trade could be fair, and it is now an incredible success story. 1/3 of all bananas in the UK are fair trade now. So really what I'd say to you is we continue to use these stories to try and convert more members, more customers to become fair trade advocates, to choose fair trade. And the lovely thing about shopping at the Co-op is that we've taken some of that choice away from you, because all of the bananas we sell, all of the tea, all of the African roses, etc., are fair trade. And so we need more businesses, and we need more consumers being aware of this power, demanding fair trade from your favourite retailer, if it's not the Co-op, which I'd be very shocked, or your favourite brand. You have a huge, huge part to play in this system. And I think that's what's so exciting about the fair trade movement, is it's not just about the Co-op, it's just about the farmer, even though they are absolutely at the heart of this. It's about everyone who's involved in that supply chain: consumer, government, brand, retailer, you know, everyone can make a difference in what they do and is involved in this amazing. So I'll probably stop rather than there. I did tell you I'd get a bit ranty, and we can maybe go on to some of your questions.
Thank you, Emily. That was fantastic, and I think, well, personally, I found that really inspirational. So thank you. Right, so we've got a few questions here. Right, the first one is, for a new producer partnering with Fair Trade, what improvements to their operations, lives, and communities could they expect?
It's a really good question. So really, producers, it's a really fantastic way, and especially as being the Co-op, that we can think about how, as a cooperative, we have such a unique business model and an amazing legacy that I know we're all proud of, with the Rochdale Pioneers and everything like this, and doing business differently. Well, actually, the first thing that happens with a fair trade producer, in order to enter the system, they need to become a cooperative themselves. And this is really about supporting these small scale farmers. And there are also larger plantations that are involved in the fair trade system, but it's mainly prioritized around small scale farmers. Is helping them have greater power and resilience in the global system. So the first thing they have to do is to form a cooperative, and that means that they are stronger, they can cooperate amongst each other, and then they also have to meet and work together to meet fair trade standards. So the fair trade standards cover, environmental standards, like I talked about, like use of pesticides, agrochemicals, agricultural practice, all of these sorts of things, also anti-deforestation, biodiversity, all these sorts of things, but also ethical. So no child labour, all of these aspects, standards on how they should operate ethically, and also financially and other areas, so that they're governed in a great way. So the producers have to develop to meet these standards, and they're audited by FlowCert as part of the system, because obviously we are making a claim in order to do this. So there's a huge benefit here, but by firstly making these producers less vulnerable in the global system, so ensuring that they have power and voice, but also then being fair trade certified can sell into other fair trade businesses who want to purchase fair trade, and then get that higher premium of the higher minimum price and premium for their goods. So there's a huge benefit from that side of things. And then another area, which is not as well known about, actually, I've found, is that Fairtrade also operates producer networks. So there are three. You have the NAP in Asia Pacific, you have CLAC in Latin America, and you have Fairtrade Africa in Africa. And the producer networks are there to support the producers to meet the standards, but also to do project work with the producers to support them in tackling some of the issues that they face. So that may be helping them to become more productive. It may be about training them on new agricultural practice. It may be about helping them tackle, issues of child labour if that were to happen. And those producer networks support the communities and the producers to work together, and also to cooperate across different regions as well. So Women's School of Leadership is a really good example. So that's run by Fairtrade Africa, but it's 7 different cooperatives, cocoa cooperatives within the Women's School of Leadership. And there's a huge benefit from farmers being able to learn from each other. So it's a massively impactful system and delivers so much for producers once they get involved in it. But it, again, as I say, it requires people to purchase fair trade in order for that benefit to get that to the producers. So we all need to continue to purchase fair trade.
It really sounds like it empowers them and it gives them control of their own destiny, which is fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So our next question is, there are still many products on the shelves that aren't produced as fair trade. Do the product manufacturers have to do more, or are some producers skeptical about fair trade?
So fair trade doesn't exist in every single ingredient supply chain, and there's a really good reason for that. One, there's a lot of ingredients around the world, and you have to focus somewhere and make sure that you have big impact in certain supply chains. There has to be an element of focus. And so the focus is on the high risk ingredients, which are high risk because of the social and poverty that exists in those supply chains. So like I said about cocoa, only 23 pence per day for female cocoa farmers, when actually the estimates of what a living wage in Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana is like £1.23 a day. We're not talking about a huge disparity. We're not talking about our sort of wages here. Like a very small difference would make a huge difference in those communities. And so there's obviously some focus that has to happen there. And, obviously some things don't grow in the developing world. So fair trade is targeting the most vulnerable people in the developing world with their crops. So that's why some of the main ones are, sugar, flowers, cocoa, coffee, cotton, etc. And likewise, Co-op has focused attention for the last 5 or so years on where we can make and deliver a really meaningful contribution and difference, because actually we sell a lot of cocoa through all of our products all year round. So if we convert 100% of our cocoa to fair trade, we can have a much bigger impact. And so we've really tried to focus our attention also on how we can make the biggest impact for producers.
Fantastic. Many fair trade many fair trade products are sourced further from home than their non-fair trade counterparts. It seems intuitive to suggest that would increase the environmental impact of fair trade produce. Is that the case?
You really can't say in a general way, because it completely depends on the supply chain. And I know the data doesn't exist there for everything. However, I'm going to just touch on a couple of examples to pull out where there is the data. Carbon emissions and carbon footprinting is like so challenging. And you have to really look at very specific examples to make a clear comparison. But one that has been done, because this gets asked quite often, is around cut flowers. So 100% of our African roses are fair trade. And this is a massive industry. It's worth over $100 billion per year. And actually the biggest supplier of cut flowers is the Netherlands. We think about the Netherlands, we think about tulips, we think about loads of amazing flowers, the most beautiful fields. And we also get, a lot of people who believe that, if you get something sourced more locally, it's definitely a lower impact. to the environment. And it's just not always the case. It depends on a lot of things like the seasonality, how it's grown, whether it's native to that land, all of these different types of things. So on cut flowers, Fairtrade did a study comparing Netherlands to Kenya, and Kenya is where we get our roses from. And actually Kenya is the fourth biggest exporter of flowers. They're 7.5% of the market, but actually that supports 2 million people in Kenya with jobs. Not all of those are fair trade, obviously, but it's a huge impact to the economic development of Kenya. And it's the second largest agricultural kind of part of the economy after tea. So it's hugely important to Kenya. In Kenya, poverty is a huge issue, and you have issues again of like a lack of education and associated issues with poverty. And Fairtrade flowers are a huge way that those communities are lifted out of poverty and are given a better life. And through the premium, they're able to educate their kids and have a better future for them in the future. So what Fairtrade did was to look at and compare the environmental impact between Netherlands roses and roses in Kenya. And actually they found that Kenyan grown roses generated a lower environmental impact, even when you take into account the air freight transport. And the reason for that was actually because the big issue with the Netherlands is that the roses are grown in greenhouses, which need to be heated, whereas the Kenyan roses are grown in the lovely sunshine that I wish we had here, and are grown naturally and benefit from all year round, moderate temperatures, sunlight, consistent rainfall, and much more a better climate basically for growing roses. And so even when you account for the negative impacts of the air freight, the roses grown in Kenya actually still generate significantly lower emissions and use less energy. And it's actually greenhouse gas emissions were 5.5 times lower. And so these are some of the things where people don't, it's really simple to think that actually, oh yes, from the Netherlands, that of course would have a lower impact, but it's not as simple as that. And there's also other like really fantastic examples of where Fairtrade work with farmers to improve the environmental impact. And this is something I was talking about today with a colleague, that many of you might know or you might not know that obviously in traditional practices in developing countries, many women will, and it's usually women sadly, but they will cook over traditional, open fires in their houses, and they'll collect wood for many hours a day, and it's a huge part of their daily routine is collecting wood to build their fires and to cook food for their family. Huge part of their day. And some of the huge issues from that is actually health. So women standing over this open fire or working in the home are breathing in damaging smoke, carbon dioxide all day, and it's a huge contributor to burns, coughs, lung diseases, etc., early death of women in the developing world. And it also, the smoke from the fires causes pollution locally, and the wood gathering can result in deforestation and damaging the soil and all the harmful emissions associated with that. So it's a huge problem in many countries. But actually, Fairtrade has worked with many cooperatives now to help producers move to more energy efficient cook stoves. And for one example that's been amazing in 2020, one supplier in co-op supply chain, Oromia Coffee Cooperative Union, who are based in Ethiopia, they distributed 20,000 cook stoves to their members and households. And that has led to amazing benefits in terms of, firstly, time of the women who don't need to go out and get wood all day, cutting the carbon emissions, reducing deforestation, and improving health. And so it's a really big, amazing way that people can, these small changes can lead to a much bigger change. But in addition, this cooperative have earned money from selling carbon credits to companies as well. So they are selling the benefits of their carbon reduction into global carbon schemes. And they've earned £192,000 for their cooperative through the sale of carbon credits. And so that's an amazing example of how, if you help people in the global supply chain to improve their own lives, you can have a ripple effect in how it improves everything for everyone.
Yeah, it's staggering. It's really impressive. Right. Confucius said, "Give a man a fish and you'll feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you'll feed him for a lifetime." Does fair trade incorporate the idea behind that idiom into its methods?
Yeah, I think it really does. And I think I've already touched on it, Sol, in my previous questions. I think it's all about empowerment. It's all about supporting the longer term sustainability of those farmers. It's about giving people the tools, the education to help themselves. And a big thing about this is many farmers have just become a farmer because their whole family is a farmer and their grandparents were a farmer. And sometimes there are practices which aren't, up to date with what we would think is, environmentally friendly or, good agricultural technique. And some things are obviously better if you do it more simple way. But this is all about empowering farmers, helping them work better together, and offering them an opportunity for them to change their own lives. So I think it's a really, really important part of the solution.
This is a question I think I've got two more questions, but I'll make sure to get Terry's got his hand up, so I'll get Terry in before our last one. Right. Last year, Nestle stopped sourcing their chocolate and sugar for Kit Kats from fair trade producers, reportedly costing the farmers almost £2 million. How can consumers and organisations like the Co-op help and prevent similar situations in the future?
It's I'm not going to sit here and not say that we were hugely disappointed by this move. Nestle they worked with, they consulted with producers who very clearly said that it was not what they wanted and wasn't what was best for them. And some of the producers in those supply chains are also in our supply chains and we work with. So it's a huge loss of premium and minimum price and security for those farmers. And so from what we can do, it's very much about maintaining our commitment and using our voice to ask for other companies to make similar commitments. If you are able to switch if you're not already buying a fair trade product, and if you're and you can, I think you should. And I think that's one of the best ways that we can all be a part of the difference. And things like Fairtrade Fortnight also give us an opportunity to use our voices and get involved and learn and get curious about the difference of fair trade and connect with other like-minded people who believe in trade justice. And so there's loads and loads and loads of ways that you can get involved and use your power, even as a consumer.
Would you like to ask your question now, Terry?
Cheers, Saul. Thank you. First off, thanks to everyone for the evening so far. It's been amazing. I'm really enjoying myself, and I feel like I'm still learning loads. So my question is about the fair trade premium. So that's like extra money on top of the sale cost or the buying cost of the products. Does that money go back into the running costs for the producers, or can it go on other things?
It's a really good question. So to be really, really clear, the premium is included in the cost of purchasing fair trade. So it's absolutely not negotiable. So if we buy a fair trade banana, the price will include the fair trade minimum price and also the premium. So it's non-negotiable. So sometimes it's seen sometimes as about like a charitable donation. It's not, and it's incredibly important. However, it is slightly separate. So those cooperatives that I mentioned that form in the supply chain, they will also have a fair trade premium committee. So that additional fund will go back to the fair trade premium committee, who are elected, and they also have rules as to what they can and can't use the premium for. And the premium is then decided on by their members, who will then vote in favour of the money for. So that can include building a play park for children, which I've seen when I've been out. It can be around agricultural training for the workers on the for instance. It could be used on protective equipment if they don't have that. It could be on adult education or on income diversification projects. So, you know, I've seen amazing projects where people have started up a side hustle, as it's been called to me, but, you know, being reliant on a single crop is extremely risky, actually, given, you know, climate change and given, you know, unpredictable weather. So in Banalino Cooperative in Dominican Republic, who we source our bananas from, they've been working really closely with the farmers there so that they have alternative crops, both for the local economy, so, you know, chickens, or so they can sell eggs or meat, but also cocoa, so they can again sell a different crop into the global supply chain, but also improve the biodiversity on the farm. So a lot of the work that they do is to, and again, this is all advised as well by the producer networks and the Fairtrade system, is to help get a wider benefit to the producers. So boosting livelihoods, improving, you know, education, mitigating climate change, which I can talk a little bit more about as well with some projects that Co-op have done. But there's all having a wider impact. But one of the things which is really key to this, Terry, is the producers decide themselves. It's not me at the co-op going, I think you should do this. It's not fair trade. There are rules, obviously, for how it is used, but it is themselves deciding on what's best for them. And that's what, again, stands fair trade apart from any other scheme.
Thank you for the question, Terry.
Thank you.
Marek?
Thank you, So. My question is, does fair trade overseeing the production of a crop, let's say cocoa beans, does it extend its overseeing into the transportation of the product and make sure to opt for the least environmentally harmful method of transporting that crop?
Really good question. No, it doesn't. So the fair trade scheme is all about supporting the most vulnerable people in the supply chain, where we've still got a lot of work to do. So it's all about trying to drive impact at the bottom of the supply chain. There are rules of engagement above. Co-op has to be a licensed fair trade entity as well. So we all have rules of engagement to ensure that the premium and fair price that we pay reaches the producers, and there's loads of checks and balances on that. But in terms of the environmental impact up the chain, that's not within the scope of what Fairtrade is working on, and that's the responsibility of retailers and brands and transportation companies to ensure that we're all working towards reducing the environmental impact of our operations.
Thank you.
Good question, Mark. So we've got our last one here, and it's research shows it's the fair trade producers who are most often affected by climate change. How important is it for them from an environmental standpoint that others practice more sustainable trade? And I think maybe to pitch in after you, Emily, I think we've got Lois from the Co-ops Council, and I think she might have something to say on this too.
Oh, well, it's lovely to hear from Lois. Well, I'm going to go back to my slides now then, because I think a picture tells 1,000 words. So climate change is an absolutely hugely scary prospect that we all are facing, and I don't know any of you personally, but I'm sure you're noticing in the news more and more, news stories and concern about the impact that we are all having on the environment and the impact that's having to nature and the ecosystems that we all depend on. So it's a hugely concerning area. And what I would say also is that despite contributing the least to the climate crisis, smallholders in developing countries are disproportionately affected and have fewer resources to adapt to these challenges. And with the increasingly negative effects on land and agricultural production, farmers have told us, and I visited several fair trade producer communities and had them visit me in One Angel Square in Manchester. Every time we ask them, what are the challenges that face you? climate change is the first thing they say, because climate change has the hugest impact. Because if you can't be ensured that you're not going to be hit by a hurricane, that's happened to our coffee producers in the last year. If you can't ensure that you're not going to be flooded or then have a drought, like how on earth can you produce enough crops to sustain your family, your cooperative, your livelihood? And so it's a really, really concerning area. And there's some additions to that around, you know, the rise of pests and diseases. We're all living in such a challenging time at the moment with the pandemic, and that has shown how fragile our global supply chains are. But also, and I'd really, because we've stopped really talking about key workers, but there are key workers in the global supply chain as well. And many of them are farmers like Anthony, who's on screen now, who I've met in Ghana. And there are incredible people who can contribute and are being affected right now by the brunt of climate change. It isn't in 2030, it's happening right now. So on that depressing note, let's talk a little bit about what we're doing about it. So on screen now, you'll see some of the wonderful producers in Kenya from Machira Cooperative Society. And this is a project that Co-op funded in 2020. So during the pandemic, and it managed to continue despite everything that's happened, obviously with safe measures in hand. So coffee is a really challenging area, and I'm sure, like me, you all love a cup of coffee now and again. And some of us may even not be able to imagine a day without it. But we do have to imagine what it'd be like for the day without it, I'm afraid. Because by 2050, it is estimated that the total area of land suitable for growing coffee, because it can only be grown in a very small area around the equator and at a certain altitude, it is estimated by 2050 that 50% of that land will be gone because of climate change, because of changing weather patterns, because of rising temperatures. So if we don't act, if we don't take responsibility and we don't invest and help farmers to mitigate climate change and work as a globe, not just the co-op, but the whole world to do our part, we won't have any coffee, or it'll become a luxury good in not too far time. And in addition to that, there's also been huge challenges with the global price. So I've talked about the importance of the Fairtrade minimum price. In 2019, the global market price of coffee dropped to its lowest point since 2003, which sparked a global coffee crisis, which affected more than 25 million smallholder coffee farmers. Now, thankfully, Fairtrade farmers were protected from this price volatility because of that Fairtrade minimum price that I've talked about. That gives them that safeguard. So if the price drops, they are protected and ensure that they have a minimum price that sustains them. But this obviously has impacted at the same time as this happening, which led to loads of coffee farmers leaving the coffee industry, pulling up their crops, moving to other crops, or becoming economic migrants. They've also been affected by climate change due to vulnerability affecting their production and their yields. So temperatures rising, and also more bugs and diseases like leaf rust are spreading, which are affecting their production, yields, and incomes. And another big challenge in coffee farming is age, actually. So coffee farmers are aging, and many of them are over 50, particularly in Kenya, where Machira are from. Most of them are over 50, and so it means that coffee farming is not just at stake from climate change and price issues, etc. It's also because younger people don't see coffee farming as a good career choice, and we need to remember that farming is a career choice as much as, you know, us sitting here working for the co-op or being members and doing our own things in the UK. If people can't see that this is a sustainable, decent livelihood, why are they going to choose to be a coffee farmer? If you can't get a decent price for your crop, why on earth would you choose to be a coffee farmer? And so one of the big challenges that Machira have is that out of their, and I get this wrong, but I think it's around 9,700 members. So these cooperatives are massive, 9,700 members. Only around 670 are youth, or technically youth. So you can see that there's a huge generational gap and a loss of also of knowledge being shared to a new generation. So to tackle this and to help Nutera tackle this, Co-op has supported Fairtrade Africa's East Africa Youth in Coffee programme. And this is, you can see on screen some of the people that have benefited from that amazing programme that we ran last year. And so this is seeking to create more opportunities for the involvement of young people in the coffee value chain. And this 6-month project conducted loads of different interventions, but it's ended up by training over 60 youths over a 2-month training period on good agricultural practices, coffee nutrition, so how you have a really good crop and you have healthy and diverse and biodiverse crops, but also the establishment of what you can see at the bottom right, bottom left, of clonal gardens where they are growing more climate resilient coffee bean plants. And in this coming year, they are distributing 200,000 seedlings to farmers, with priority going to youths and women at Nutera Farmers Cooperative Society. And it's estimated that this will increase the production over the next 3 years by 2 million kilograms of coffee cherry, which is what it's called when it's the little red cherry you see at the bottom right. So these interventions, as you can see, can have a huge impact. Like a small project like this can have a much bigger impact in supporting farmers. And I have one more case study I can share with you, because I've realised we're low on time, so if you bear with me, because this is a really amazing project that's close to my heart. So bananas, we talked about bananas earlier. And bananas are an amazing crop. I think we forget that this is a really exotic product, and it's not normal in our lifetimes to have a banana every day, and they're so nutritious and amazing, and they're actually naturally radioactive, because I know these bizarre exotic facts now. But actually bananas are also the 8th most important global food. I think we forget that it's an incredibly important global food, and it's the 4th most important food crop in developing countries. And actually only 15% of bananas grown are exported, because they're so important as a local food, and they feed many people locally, hugely nutritious food source. And there's loads of different types of banana. We get the Cavendish that you can see on screen here, because it transports well and it's a great variety. But locally you eat lots of different types, and you have plantain and all these sorts of things. But the Cavendish is at threat by a fungus called TR4, or Panama disease, which is killing banana crops around the world. It's spread through the soil, and it's leading to the destruction of banana plantations and smallholder farms across the world. And how the TR4 works is it spreads through soil and moisture, and it finds its way into the roots of the banana plant, and then the fungus will destroy the tree from within. And it can also live in the soil for, they think, decades. So it's a really obviously devastating thing, especially if this is what you rely for your total income on. So one of those things I talked about earlier about income diversification is just so important to farmers like this to avoid issues like this. And smallholder farmers face loads of challenges anyway, including climate change. But loss of soil fertility, low productivity sometimes because they may not have the skills they need, but also decreased profitability and competitiveness, because a lot of big companies won't work with smallholders because they see them as more risky. But actually Co-op has industry-leading commitment on Fairtrade bananas, where our unique sourcing policy commits us to 100% cooperative supply, and obviously all of our bananas are Fairtrade and have been for ages anyway, with a minimum of 50% coming from small producers. And so the project that we've worked on here is called the Progress in Productivity Program. And this is around trying to increase the productivity of banana producers in our supply chain, helping them improve the fertility and soil health. So helping them to reduce the risk of TR4 because their farms are healthier, and also taking them down an organic production approach. And so helping the Fairtrade farmers to remain more competitive have better mechanisms to avoid disease, having more biodiverse farms. And this has seen huge benefits to the producers, where they've gone and been able to produce a lot more on a smaller, on the same amount of land, reducing the use of agrochemicals, etc., and increasing that soil diversity, which is so important to mitigating climate change, is improving the fertility, enhancing, restoring our natural landscape. And we're really pleased that this year we're funding the next phase of the project. So this has been done in Dominican Republic with 5 producers, but now we're scaling up and moving into Colombia and Dominican Republic this year as well. So I realise we're really low on time, and so I'll probably just close now, Saul, with a reminder. You asked me earlier, what can we all do? So just a reminder that fair trade is an absolutely global movement of like-minded people who want to change the world. You can see me there at Heaton Park with a giant banana, campaigning to park runners. I'm out there in Ghana talking to fair trade producers. And these are amazing people. They're people behind these products who deserve a fantastic life. They deserve to have a decent income. They deserve to be treated fairly. And I think once people understand what fair trade is all about and how it works, everyone gets it. And it only works because a diverse network of people like you and me, and producers and companies and shoppers and advocates and organisations all cooperate in order to put people and planet first. And it absolutely takes every one of us working together to make it happen. So just remember, my final point to you, every time you choose that fair trade banana, every time you choose a fair trade chocolate or a coffee or a tea, and you can get them at Greg's, and you can find out more about where you can get them from the Fair Trade Foundation website, you are making a world of difference for fair trade producers. So thank you if you're already doing it. If you're not already, please do so. But it's been an absolute delight talking to you today. And I really hope this has given you something to think about.
Thank you very much, Emily. That was fantastic. I'm sorry that we've overrun, but I think everyone will agree that it was worth it. The whole event's been recorded, so we're going to upload it later if anyone wants to go over it again and look at Emily's points and then research them yourselves, because they've been fantastic. I'm just going to quickly, if anyone wants to hang on a couple minutes more, I'm going to just go back to something Emily said a few minutes ago, and she mentioned that I think they were training 60 young people, and you can imagine that in the future they're going to be influencers. They're going to be the people leading for the producers, and a young person at the COP who's influencing future co-op decisions is Lois, and I think she might want to say a few things about what the co-op's doing.
Yeah, brilliant. Hi everyone, and sorry that it's overrunning a little, but I guess I'll just throw in a few words about what I'm doing with my role at the Members Council, and I'm also a member pioneer, so working both at kind of grassroots level and then at the kind of board level, if you will. So in terms of the wider council perspective, we kind of put forward a motion on climate change at the 2020 AGM, and part of it was the principles around fair trade goods, and it continues to be a priority for the group, and the council is kind of now discussing it again for a motion on this year's AGM, and we have our sort of ethical and sustainable leadership committee that we're really trying to push towards, and that they're the sort of powerhouse in terms of the council's thinking in sustainability, and fair trade is a large part of that, of course. So yeah, they're meeting regularly with the food policy team, and are the first point of call when it comes to issues around fair trade, which I think is really good that we're getting kind of the board involved, and us as co-opted council members, young people on the council, are really trying to look towards implementing these fair trade and sustainable policies, and yeah, looking towards in the long run, all of the work kind of goes into our sort of Future of Food co-op 2020 ambition campaign. So it's about sort of the co-op, what they're doing around food, and ensuring that kind of the issues with the large handling of food and fair trade sort of issues are addressed. So I think that's just like, you know, a good thing to leave on, and just think about how the co-op are really trying to address these issues at both board level and within the grassroots. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you, that was really good. And thank you, Emily. Your presentation was fantastic, and I really hope you've inspired people. So thank you for sharing your time with us and sharing your enthusiasm with fair trade, because I think it was really infectious. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's going to consider what products they buy from now on. Thank you everyone else for attending. If you've got any feedback or you'd like to continue the discussion with us, we'd love to hear it on our CYMG Facebook group and Twitter, which you'll find links for in the description. I encourage you to check out our recording of this later. And I think that's it. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Cheers, Fairtrade.